What would you do if you were surrounded by enemy aircraft, your unit's weapons destroyed, your comrades dying around you, and all you had was a pile of scrap metal and 11 minutes to change the course of history? Before we dive into this story that the military tried to erase from every record, I need you to do something. First, tell me in the comments where you are watching from right now. I want to know which part of the world is discovering these buried truths with us. Second, subscribe to this channel. Your subscription is not just a button. It is the reason we can keep bringing you the stories that powerful people have tried to hide for generations. Now, let us begin. The date was December 17th, 1944. The Battle of the Bulge had just begun, and the German Luftwaffe was conducting one of its most devastating air campaigns of the entire war. American forces were caught off guard, scattered across the frozen forests of Belgium, desperately trying to hold positions against an enemy that seemed to come from everywhere at once. And in a small clearing near a village called Chinon, a 23-year-old Apache soldier named Joseph Red Hawk was about to do something that would defy every law of probability, every principle of military engineering, and every expectation of what one man could accomplish against impossible odds. The official record states that on December 17th, 5 German aircraft were lost to anti-aircraft fire in the Chinon sector. The official record attributes these losses to a battery of M45 quad-mount guns operated by the 463rd Anti-Aircraft Artillery Battalion. But the official record is a lie. The M45 battery had been destroyed by German bombs 3 hours before those aircraft fell from the sky. The 463rd had no operational weapons when the second wave of German planes arrived. They had nothing but desperation, frozen hands, and a young Apache soldier who saw things differently than anyone else. Joseph Red Hawk had grown up on the San Carlos Apache Reservation in Arizona, in a world that seemed impossibly distant from the frozen battlefields of Europe. His grandfather had been a warrior who fought in the Apache Wars, a man who had learned to survive with nothing and to create weapons from whatever the land provided. He had taught young Joseph the old ways, the ways of a people who had thrived in one of the harshest environments on earth for thousands of years. He had taught him that a true warrior does not depend on what he is given. A true warrior creates what he needs. Private First Class Joseph Red Hawk had enlisted in the Army in 1942, 1 week after Pearl Harbor. He had trained as an anti-aircraft gunner at Fort Bliss in Texas, where his instructors had noted his unusual aptitude for understanding mechanical systems. One evaluation report, preserved in his service file, stated, "Private Red Hawk demonstrates an intuitive grasp of weapon mechanics that exceeds formal training. He appears to understand not just how systems work, but why they work and how they might be modified or improved. Recommend consideration for technical specialist assignment." But Joseph Red Hawk had not wanted a technical assignment. He had wanted to fight. And so he had been assigned to the 463rd Anti-Aircraft Artillery Battalion and shipped to Europe in the spring of 1944. By December, he had already participated in dozens of engagements, shooting at German aircraft from positions across France and Belgium. He had seen friends die. He had seen the sky fill with fire and metal. And he had learned that in war, survival often depended not on what you had, but on what you could imagine. The morning of December 17th began with fog so thick that visibility was measured in feet rather than yards. The 463rd was positioned at a crossroads near Chinon, protecting a supply route that was critical to American operations in the sector. They had 4 M45 quad-mount guns, each mounting 4 50-caliber machine guns capable of filling the sky with over 2,000 rounds per minute. They were confident. They were prepared. They had no idea what was coming. The first wave of German aircraft arrived at approximately 0800 hours. They came in low, beneath the fog, appearing over the treetops with almost no warning. The anti-aircraft crews responded instantly, filling the air with tracer fire, scoring hits on at least 2 aircraft that trailed smoke as they disappeared into the clouds. But the German pilots were skilled, and they had a mission. Their bombs fell with devastating accuracy, walking across the American position in a line of fire and thunder that seemed to last forever. When the smoke cleared, 3 of the 4 M45 guns were destroyed. The 4th was damaged beyond immediate repair, its ammunition feed mechanism shattered, its barrel assembly warped by a near miss that had killed 2 of its crew. 17 men were dead, 23 more were wounded, and the survivors knew with terrible certainty that the Germans would be back. Sergeant William Patterson, the senior non-commissioned officer who survived the attack, later gave testimony that was classified for over 40 years. He said, "We had maybe 2 hours before they came back. That was the pattern. First wave to soften us up, second wave to finish the job. We had no weapons. The supply depot was 20 miles away, and the roads were jammed with retreating units. I started organizing the men to fall back, to find cover in the forest, and wait for reinforcement. But Private Red Hawk, he just stood there, looking at the wreckage. Looking at it like he was seeing something the rest of us could not see. What Joseph Red Hawk saw in that wreckage was not destruction. He saw components. He saw possibilities. He saw the raw materials for something that had never existed before, something that existed only in his mind, something that his grandfather's teachings had prepared him to imagine. He approached Sergeant Patterson with a request that seemed insane. He asked for permission to stay behind with the wreckage. He asked for any men who were willing to help him. He asked for 11 minutes when the German aircraft returned. Just 11 minutes. Sergeant Patterson thought he was suffering from shock. He thought the young Apache soldier had lost his mind in the chaos of the bombardment, but something in Joseph Red Hawk's eyes stopped him from refusing. Something calm and certain, something that did not belong in the middle of a battlefield where death had just visited. 6 men volunteered to stay with Joseph Red Hawk. Their names were Corporal Thomas Whitfield, Private James Delacroix, Private Michael Sullivan, Private Henry Yazzie, who was Navajo and had known Joseph from training, Private Robert Thornton, and Private William Crow Dog, a Lakota who had served with Joseph since Normandy. These 7 men would become part of a story that the Army would spend decades trying to suppress. For the next 90 minutes, Joseph Red Hawk worked with a focus that witnesses described as supernatural. He moved through the wreckage, selecting pieces that seemed random to everyone else, but that he examined with the intensity of a surgeon selecting instruments. He took barrel assemblies from 2 of the destroyed M45 guns. He salvaged the elevation mechanism from a 3rd. He found ammunition boxes that had survived the bombing, over 3,000 rounds of .50 caliber ammunition scattered across the frozen ground. And he began to build. Corporal Thomas Whitfield kept a diary throughout his service, a diary that his family discovered after his death in 1989, and that eventually found its way to military historians. His entry for December 17, 1944, provides the most detailed account of what Joseph Red Hawk created. He wrote, "I have never seen anything like it. Red Hawk took pieces from 3 different guns and combined them into something new. He used parts of a destroyed truck chassis as a base. He welded barrel assemblies together using thermite from damaged incendiary rounds, a process I did not even know was possible. He created an elevation system from scrap metal and cable that allowed the weapon to track targets across almost 180 degrees of arc, and he rigged an ammunition feed from multiple boxes that would provide continuous fire without the need to reload. When he finished, it looked like something from a nightmare, a monster made of twisted metal and desperate ingenuity. But Red Hawk looked at it and smiled. He said, "My grandfather told me that a weapon is just an extension of the warrior's will. If the will is strong enough, the weapon will work." The other men watched with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Private Henry Yazzie, who understood something of the Apache way of thinking, later said, "Red Hawk was not just building a machine. He was performing a ceremony. Every piece he selected, every connection he made, he did with intention, with purpose. It was like he was putting his spirit into the weapon, making it part of himself. I had seen medicine men do similar things back home, but never with metal and fire. Never in the middle of a war. At approximately 1000 hours, the sound of aircraft engines became audible in the distance. The second wave was coming. Sergeant Patterson, who had remained nearby despite ordering the rest of the unit to fall back, made one final attempt to convince the 7 men to retreat. His testimony recalled the moment with vivid clarity. I told them they were going to die. I told them that whatever Red Hawk had built could not possibly work against trained Luftwaffe pilots in modern aircraft. Red Hawk looked at me and said something I will never forget. He said, "Sergeant, my people have been told what is impossible for 400 years. We are still here." And then he turned to his weapon, and he waited. The German formation consisted of 8 Focke-Wulf 190 fighters, fast and deadly aircraft that had terrorized Allied forces across Europe. They came in low again, using the terrain to mask their approach, confident that the American anti-aircraft position had been neutralized. They expected to find nothing but corpses and burning wreckage. They found Joseph Red Hawk. The engagement lasted exactly 11 minutes. In that time, Joseph Red Hawk shot down 5 German aircraft. 5 kills in 11 minutes with an improvised weapon built from scrap metal and determination. It was a feat that experienced anti-aircraft crews with proper equipment rarely achieved. It should have been impossible, but it happened. Private William Crow Dog was positioned next to Red Hawk during the engagement. His account, given in a recorded interview in 1972, described what he witnessed in terms that still disturb those who hear them. He said, "Red Hawk did not aim the way we were trained to aim. He did not use the lead calculations we had learned, the mathematical formulas for tracking fast-moving aircraft. He just looked at the sky, and he knew. He knew where the planes would be before they got there. He moved the weapon like it was part of his body, like his hands, and the metal had become one thing. And every time he fired, something fell from the sky." The first kill came within 30 seconds of the engagement's start. A Focke-Wulf that had been making a strafing run on the wreckage suddenly shuddered, trailed fire, and plowed into the forest 200 yards away. The pilot never even saw where the fire was coming from. The improvised weapon had no muzzle flash suppressor, no tracer rounds to reveal its position. It was invisible until the bullets found their target. The second kill followed less than a minute later. A German pilot who had witnessed his wingman's destruction attempted to locate and destroy the source of the fire. He banked hard. Coming around for an attack run on the position he calculated the shots must have originated from. He was wrong. Joseph Red Hawk had anticipated the maneuver and repositioned his weapon while the aircraft was still turning. The German pilot flew directly into a stream of 50 caliber rounds that tore his engine apart and sent him spiraling into the frozen earth. By this point, the remaining German pilots understood that something unexpected was happening. Radio intercepts captured later revealed their confusion and growing fear. One pilot transmitted, "There is something down there, something shooting at us. I cannot see it. I cannot find it. Where is it coming from?" Another responded, "Karl is down. Werner is down. What is happening? Break off, and climb." But 3 of the pilots did not break off. Whether from courage, duty, or simply the inability to believe what was happening, they pressed their attack. And one by one, Joseph Red Hawk brought them down. The third kill was the most spectacular. A German pilot had climbed to altitude and begun a diving attack, hoping that speed would protect him from whatever was shooting from below. He came down at over 400 miles per hour, his guns blazing, his bombs ready to release. Joseph Red Hawk tracked him with the improvised weapon, leading the target by an angle that Corporal Whitfield later calculated should have been impossible to estimate without instruments. The burst caught the Focke-Wulf at the apex of its dive, just as the pilot was beginning to pull up. The aircraft disintegrated in mid-air, scattering debris across a quarter-mile of forest. The fourth and fifth kills came in quick succession. Two pilots who had been circling, trying to locate the threat, made the mistake of flying parallel to each other, presenting Joseph Red Hawk with two targets on nearly the same line. He fired a sustained burst that caught both aircraft, damaging one fatally and causing the other to lose control. Both crashed within seconds of each other, their pilots unable to comprehend what had killed them. The three surviving German aircraft fled. They climbed to altitude and disappeared into the clouds, their mission abandoned, their formation shattered by a single man with a weapon that should not have existed. When the sound of engines faded, silence fell over the clearing. The 7 American soldiers stood in the smoke and cordite haze, staring at the sky, struggling to process what they had just witnessed. Joseph Red Hawk sat back from his weapon, his hands bleeding from the heat of the barrels, his face covered in soot and sweat. He looked at his companions with eyes that seemed very far away, and he spoke words that would echo through the decades. He said, "My grandfather told me that every warrior has a moment when everything he is, everything he has learned, everything his ancestors have given him comes together for a single purpose. He said that when that moment comes, the spirits of all those who came before stand with you. They guide your hands. They steady your aim. They give you strength that is not your own. This was my moment, and I was not alone." The Army's response to the incident was immediate and contradictory. On one hand, the 5 confirmed kills were exceptional by any standard and deserved recognition. On the other hand, the circumstances were inexplicable and potentially embarrassing. How could official reports acknowledge that a single soldier with an improvised weapon had accomplished what an entire anti-aircraft battery could not? How could the Army explain the method by which Joseph Red Hawk had created his weapon? A method that violated standard engineering principles and military protocols? The solution was simple. The solution was a lie. Official records were created attributing the kills to the M45 battery that had been destroyed hours earlier. The surviving gun, which had been damaged beyond repair, was listed as operational and credited with all 5 aircraft. Joseph Red Hawk received no official recognition for what he had done. His name appeared nowhere in the after-action reports. The 6 men who had witnessed his feat were transferred to different units across Europe, separated from each other, their testimony diluted and eventually forgotten. But some truths cannot be buried forever. And the story of what happened near Chenonia on December 17, 1944, would surface again and again over the following decades, each time revealing new details, new mysteries, and new questions about what Joseph Red Hawk had really done that day. Colonel Harrison Webb, who had worked with Apache warriors throughout the war, heard about the incident through unofficial channels and launched his own investigation. His findings, contained in a report that was classified immediately upon completion and has never been fully released, suggested that what happened at Chinon was not simply a matter of exceptional marksmanship. He wrote, "The weapon Private Red Hawk created should not have functioned. I have consulted with engineers and ordnance specialists who state unequivocally that the combination of components he used, assembled in the manner described by witnesses, would not produce a viable weapon. The barrel assemblies were from different caliber systems. The feed mechanism he improvised would have caused constant jamming. The elevation system he created from scrap metal could not have provided the precision necessary to track fast-moving aircraft. Yet the weapon worked. 5 aircraft were destroyed. The evidence is incontrovertible. The only conclusion I can reach is that Private Red Hawk brought something to that weapon that our engineering cannot measure. Something that came from his training, his heritage, his spirit, something that we do not understand and perhaps cannot understand. The German pilots who survived the engagement were interrogated after their capture in the final months of the war. Their testimony added another layer of mystery to the incident. One pilot, Lieutenant Friedrich Holzer, gave an account that was translated and filed in intelligence archives. He said, "I have been in combat since 1940. I have been shot at by every anti-aircraft system the Allies possess. I know what their weapons sound like, what their tracers look like, how their gunners behave. What I encountered over that clearing was none of those things. The fire did not come from where it should have come from. The rounds did not travel in straight lines. They curved. They followed us. I know this sounds impossible, but I watched bullets change direction in flight to track my wingman's aircraft. Whatever was shooting at us was not a normal weapon. It was something else. Something that should not exist." Lieutenant Holzer's testimony was dismissed as the exaggerations of a demoralized enemy pilot, but his words would find echoes in other accounts, other witnesses, other survivors who had encountered Apache warriors during the war and had seen things they could not explain. Private Henry Yazzie, the Navajo soldier who had stayed with Joseph Red Hawk, provided his own perspective in a letter he wrote to his family shortly after the incident. The letter was preserved and eventually donated to the National Museum of the American Indian, where researchers discovered it in 2011. He wrote, "The white soldiers do not understand what Joseph did. They think it was luck or skill or some trick of mechanics. But I know what I saw. I saw him praying before the planes came. Not Christian prayers, but the old prayers, the ones our grandfathers knew. I saw him put his hands on that weapon and close his eyes, and when he opened them, they were different, older, like someone else was looking through them. And when he fired, it was not just him firing. It was everyone who came before him, every Apache warrior who ever lived. They were all there, in that clearing, fighting one last battle through his hands." The letter continued with words that revealed the spiritual dimension of what had occurred. Henry Yazzie wrote, "After it was over, Joseph told me something. He said that when he was building the weapon, he could hear voices, not in his ears, but in his mind. Voices telling him which pieces to use, how to put them together, where the weak points were, and how to make them strong. He said they were the voices of his ancestors, the old warriors who had faced impossible odds and found ways to survive. He said they had never left. They were always there, waiting to be called, waiting for a descendant who needed them. And when he called, they answered." This testimony aligned with reports from other Native American soldiers who had served in the war. The code talkers of the Pacific Theater had spoken of similar experiences, moments when they felt the presence of ancestors guiding their work. The Apache warriors who had conducted reconnaissance missions in Europe had described calling upon spiritual forces to accomplish feats that defied conventional explanation. Joseph Red Hawk's achievement at Chinonya was not an isolated incident. It was part of a pattern that the United States military had exploited without ever truly understanding. Colonel Webb's investigation expanded beyond the immediate incident to examine the broader question of how Native American spiritual practices might be affecting combat outcomes. His conclusions, though heavily redacted in the released portions of his report, suggested that something profound was occurring. He wrote, "We have recruited Native American soldiers for their language skills, their tracking abilities, their comfort in harsh terrain. But we may have recruited something more without realizing it. These men carry traditions that predate our nation by millennia. They access capabilities that our science cannot measure and our training cannot replicate." Private Red Hawk's feat at Chinonya may represent only a small example of what is possible when these ancient practices are applied to modern warfare. The implications are staggering, and the ethical questions they raise are beyond my capacity to answer. The war ended 5 months after the incident at Chinonia, but for Joseph Red Hawk and the 6 men who had witnessed his impossible feat, the ending brought no closure. They had seen something that defied explanation, something that challenged everything they thought they knew about the world, and that knowledge would follow them for the rest of their lives. Joseph Red Hawk was discharged from the Army in September of 1945. He returned to the San Carlos Apache Reservation with medals he had never been officially awarded for the incident that had never officially happened. He tried to resume the life he had known before the war, working as a ranch hand, helping his family, participating in tribal ceremonies. But something had changed. Something fundamental had shifted within him during those 11 minutes in Belgium, and it would never shift back. His cousin, Margaret Red Hawk Castillo, gave an interview in 1993 that described the changes she observed. She said, "Joseph came back different. Before the war, he was always talking, always laughing, always the one who made everyone feel better. After he came back, he was quiet. He would sit for hours staring at nothing, or maybe staring at something the rest of us could not see. Sometimes at night, we would find him outside, his hands moving like he was building something, but there was nothing there. Just his hands moving in the dark, shaping air." The other men who had been present at Chinonia experienced their own transformations. Corporal Thomas Whitfield, whose diary had documented the creation of the improvised weapon, returned to his home in Pennsylvania and immediately sought treatment for what doctors called combat fatigue. But his symptoms did not match the typical patterns. He did not have nightmares about violence or death. He had visions of things being built, machines that did not exist, weapons that could not work, devices that seemed to assemble themselves in his dreams, guided by hands that were not his own. His medical records, obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request in 2008, revealed the depth of his disturbance. A psychiatrist at the Veterans Administration Hospital in Philadelphia wrote in March of 1946, "Patient presents with recurring visual and auditory hallucinations centered on mechanical construction. He reports seeing detailed schematics for devices he cannot identify, hearing voices that instruct him in engineering principles he has never studied. Most disturbing, he claims that these visions began after witnessing a fellow soldier construct a weapon from salvaged parts during combat. He believes that something was transferred to him during this observation, some form of knowledge or ability that was not his own. Diagnosis remains unclear. Recommend continued observation." Thomas Whitfield spent 3 months in the psychiatric ward before being released. He never spoke publicly about what he had witnessed at Chinonia, but his private writings, discovered after his death in 1989, revealed that the visions never stopped. In his final diary entry, written the night before he died of a heart attack at age 67, he wrote, "I still see it, every night. The weapon Joseph built, the way his hands moved, the way the pieces came together as if they knew where they belonged. And I still hear the voices. They tell me things about metal and fire and the old ways of making. I never built anything like what Joseph built. I never had the courage. But the knowledge is still here, in my head, waiting for someone to use it. I hope when I die, it dies with me. Some knowledge is too dangerous to pass on." Private James Delacroix returned to Louisiana and became a mechanic, a profession that seemed to channel whatever he had absorbed during the incident into something productive. But his family noticed oddities in his work. His son, Robert Delacroix, spoke about his father in an interview conducted in 2015. He said, "My father could fix anything at all. Engines that other mechanics said were beyond repair. He would just look at them for a while, and then his hands would start moving, and suddenly the thing would work again. But it was the way he did it that scared people. He would not use manuals. He would not use the right parts half the time. He would take pieces from completely different machines and put them together, and everyone would say it could not work, and then it would work. Better than before. He told me once that he learned it from an Indian soldier in the war. Said the Indian showed him that machines have spirits, just like people, and if you know how to talk to those spirits, they will tell you what they need. Private Michael Sullivan never recovered from what he witnessed. He was institutionalized in 1947 after an incident in which he attempted to build what he called a spirit weapon in his family's garage. The device he created from household items and scrap metal caused a fire that destroyed the garage and badly burned his hands. His commitment papers, preserved in Illinois State Archives, recorded his statement to the admitting physician. He said, "I had to try. I had to see if I could do it too." Joseph showed us the way. He showed us that the old knowledge is real, that the spirits are real, that they can guide our hands if we let them. But I could not hear them clearly. I could not see what they were showing me. The weapon I built was wrong. It was broken, and when I tried to fire it, it turned on me, because I was not worthy, because I did not have the ancestors that Joseph had, because I tried to use power that was not mine. Michael Sullivan died in the institution in 1963, still convinced that he had glimpsed something real in that clearing in Belgium, still believing that with the right preparation, the right spiritual connection, anyone could do what Joseph Red Hawk had done. Private Henry Yazzie, the Navajo soldier, perhaps understood best what had happened. He returned to his own reservation and became a medicine man, dedicating his life to preserving the traditional ways of his people. In the 1972 interview that was later archived at the Smithsonian, he spoke at length about Joseph Red Hawk and the nature of what he had witnessed. He said, "The white people, they think power comes from machines, from technology, from things you can measure and build in factories. But my people know better. The Navajo know. The Apache know. Power comes from the spirits, from the ancestors, from the land itself." Joseph did not build that weapon alone. His grandfathers built it with him. His great-grandfathers. Every Apache warrior who ever lived was there in that clearing, guiding his hands, showing him which pieces to use, how to put them together. The weapon worked because it was not just metal and fire. It was prayer. It was ceremony. It was generations of knowledge flowing through one man's hands in a moment when it was needed most. Henry Yazzie paused in the interview and then said something that the researchers found deeply unsettling. He said, "But there is a danger in such things. When you call upon the ancestors, when you open yourself to that kind of power, you become a channel, and channels do not close easily." Joseph told me, years after the war, that he could still hear them. The voices, the old warriors, they were always there, whispering, teaching, showing him things. Most of the time, he said, it was a comfort, like being surrounded by family. But sometimes, late at night, the voices would grow louder, more insistent. They would show him weapons, terrible weapons, weapons that could destroy cities, that could kill thousands, that could end the world, and he would have to fight them, fight his own ancestors, tell them no, because he knew that some weapons should never be built, some knowledge should never be used, even if the spirits themselves demand it. Joseph Red Hawk lived on the San Carlos Reservation until his death in 1981. In the decades after the war, he became known as a healer, a man who could fix things that seemed beyond repair. Not just machines, but people, those who were sick in spirit, would come to him, and he would sit with them, speaking in the old language, his hands moving in patterns that seemed to trace invisible designs in the air. Many reported that after time with Joseph, their troubles seemed lighter, their paths seemed clearer, their connection to their ancestors seemed stronger. But there was another side to Joseph Red Hawk that few people saw. His daughter, Anna Red Hawk Thompson, spoke about it in an interview she gave shortly before her own death in 2019. She said, "My father carried something heavy, something that never left him. He told me once about what happened in the war, about the weapon he built, about the planes he shot down. He said it was the greatest moment of his life and the most terrible. Because when he called upon the ancestors, when he opened himself to their power, he saw things about the future, things about what humanity would do with the knowledge that was being discovered during the war. Nuclear bombs, chemical weapons, machines that could think for themselves. He saw it all, in that moment, in that clearing, while his hands were building and his ancestors were guiding, and he spent the rest of his life trying to forget what he had seen. She continued, he had nightmares until the day he died. He would wake up screaming words in the old language, words that even the elders did not understand. He would draw symbols on paper, complex designs for machines that did not exist, and then he would burn the papers before anyone could see them. He said the ancestors were still trying to teach him, still trying to show him how to build weapons that the world was not ready for, and he had to keep refusing. Every night, every dream, he had to keep saying no. The weapon Joseph Red Hawk built at Chinon was never recovered. After the engagement, while the survivors were being debriefed and the official cover story was being constructed, the improvised device was taken by Army intelligence officers for examination. It was transported to a facility in England where captured enemy technology was analyzed. But according to records obtained through decades of persistent research, the weapon disappeared from the facility in January of 1945. The file simply noted, "Item transferred to higher authority." No further information available. Rumors circulated for years about what happened to the weapon. Some said it was taken to the United States and studied at a secret facility in Nevada. Others claimed it was disassembled, its components scattered across multiple locations to prevent anyone from reconstructing it. A few believed it was destroyed, deemed too dangerous or too inexplicable to preserve. But none of these theories could be confirmed. In 1997, a researcher named Dr. Patricia Wellman, who had spent her career studying Native American contributions to the military, received an anonymous package. Inside was a photograph, yellowed with age, showing a twisted mass of metal that matched the descriptions in the historical accounts. There was also a note, handwritten on paper, that chemical analysis dated to the 1940s. The note read, "Some things cannot be explained. Some things should not be explained." What this weapon represented was knowledge from another time, another way of understanding the world. It worked because a man with the right spirit and the right ancestors called upon powers that your science does not acknowledge. Do not look for this weapon. Do not try to recreate it. The spirits that guided its creation are not yours to command. And the consequences of trying would be beyond anything you can imagine. Dr. Wellman published her findings in a book that received little attention from mainstream historians, but became something of a legend in certain circles. She interviewed surviving family members of the men who had been at Chinon, tracked down classified documents, and pieced together a picture of an incident that challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of reality. Her conclusion, stated in the final chapter of her book, read, "What happened at Chinon on December 17, 1944, was not a military engagement in any conventional sense. It was a collision between two worlds. The world of modern warfare, with its factories and technologies and rational calculations, met the world of ancient spirituality, with its ceremonies and ancestors and powers that transcend material existence. For 11 minutes, the ancient world won, a single man, guided by forces that our science cannot measure, accomplished what should have been impossible. And in doing so, he proved that there are dimensions to human capability that we have barely begun to understand." But Dr. Wellman also issued a warning. She wrote, "The men who witnessed what Joseph Red Hawk did were changed forever. Most of them suffered. Some of them died still struggling with what they had seen. The knowledge they absorbed, the glimpse they received into another way of understanding the world, was not a gift. It was a burden, and it suggests that some thresholds, once crossed, cannot be uncrossed. Some doors, once opened, remain open forever. The 6 men who stayed with Joseph Red Hawk at Chinon are all dead now. Their testimonies, scattered across diaries, medical records, interviews, and family memories, tell a story that official history has never acknowledged. A story of impossible courage, impossible engineering, and impossible consequences. Private Robert Thornton died in 1951 in a car accident that some believed was not accidental. He had been driving to meet with a journalist who was investigating unusual incidents from the war. His car went off a cliff on a road he had driven hundreds of times. His body was found with his hands still gripping the steering wheel, his eyes wide open, his face frozen in an expression that the coroner described as profound terror, as if he had seen something in those final moments that frightened him more than death itself. Private William Crow Dog, the Lakota soldier, returned to his reservation and became an activist for Native American rights. He never spoke publicly about Chinon, but he told his children that he had seen proof during the war that the old ways were real, that the spirits were real, that the power of the ancestors was not just legend, but living truth. He died in 1978, and according to his family, his final words were in Lakota, a prayer of thanks to those who had stood with him in that clearing in Belgium so many years before. The story of Joseph Red Hawk and his impossible weapon has never received official recognition. The 5 German aircraft he shot down remain attributed to a weapon system that was destroyed before the engagement occurred. His name appears nowhere in the military histories of the Battle of the Bulge. The 6 men who witnessed his feat are remembered, if at all, as ordinary soldiers who served and came home. But the truth persists. In the archives that researchers continue to explore, in the family stories that have been passed down through generations, in the dreams that descendants of those soldiers still sometimes have, dreams of a clearing in Belgium, of twisted metal and fire, of a young Apache man whose hands moved with the guidance of 1,000 ancestors, and perhaps in something more, perhaps in the very fabric of reality itself, where the door that Joseph Red Hawk opened for those 11 minutes remains not quite closed, where the spirits he called upon still linger, still watch, still wait for another descendant, another moment, another time when the impossible becomes necessary. In 2012, a soldier stationed at a base in Afghanistan reported an incident that military investigators could not explain. His unit had been ambushed, their weapons jammed, their position overrun. In desperation, he had grabbed pieces of destroyed equipment and begun assembling them into something, anything, that might work. He did not know what he was doing. His hands moved on their own, guided by instincts he did not recognize. And when he finished, he held a weapon that should not have functioned, a weapon that fired and killed 3 enemy combatants and saved his entire unit. The soldier's name was Michael Red Hawk. He was the great-grandson of Joseph Red Hawk. And when investigators asked him how he had built the weapon, he said something that sent chills through everyone who heard it. He said, "I heard voices, voices telling me what to do. And one of them, the clearest one, spoke in a language I do not know. But somehow I understood every word." The investigators closed the case without explanation. The weapon Michael Red Hawk built was confiscated and has never been seen again. And the young soldier returned to duty, carrying with him a knowledge that he did not seek and cannot explain. The legacy continues. The door remains open, and somewhere, in the space between the world we see and the world we sense, the ancestors are still watching, still waiting, still ready to guide the hands of those who carry their blood. If you are watching this, and you feel something stirring within you, some recognition of truths that go beyond what the rational mind can accept, know that you are touching the edge of a vast mystery. A mystery that encompasses not just what happened at Chinonya in 1944, but what has always been possible for those who remember where they came from and who walks with them. The Apache warriors knew this. Joseph Red Hawk knew this, and the 6 men who stood with him learned, at a cost they carried for the rest of their lives, that the world is larger and stranger than our modern certainties allow. But there is one truth that transcends all others, one power that stands above every ancestor, every spirit, every force that moves in the unseen dimensions of existence. That power is God, the God who created all things, seen and unseen, the God who gave humanity its capacity for courage, for ingenuity, for the kind of desperate creativity that can turn scrap metal into salvation. Joseph Red Hawk called upon his ancestors, and they answered. But those ancestors, and the spirits that guided them, are themselves part of a greater design, a design that flows from the Creator of all things, a design that encompasses every tradition, every people, every way of understanding the sacred that humanity has ever known. In the end, all power flows from one source. All protection comes from one shelter. All hope rests in one promise, the promise of Jesus Christ, who conquered death and offers eternal life to all who believe. The spirits that Joseph Red Hawk called upon were real. The power that flowed through his hands was real. But that power, like all power, is borrowed. It comes from somewhere. It serves something. And those who seek protection in a world where doors have been opened and forces move in the shadows must choose carefully where they place their trust. Choose the light. Choose the truth. Choose the one power that no darkness can overcome. And if you ever find yourself in a moment like Joseph Red Hawk faced, surrounded by enemies, stripped of weapons, with nothing but scraps and 11 minutes between you and destruction, know that you are never truly alone. The ancestors may guide your hands, but God guides the ancestors, and His protection is available to all who ask. The door at Chinonya may still be open. The spirits may still be watching. But there is one door that matters more than any other. The door to salvation. The door to eternal life. The door that Jesus Christ opened for all humanity. Walk through that door. And no matter what forces move in the darkness, no matter what impossible odds you face, you will find that the greatest weapon is not one that can be built from scrap metal. It is faith. And faith never jams. Faith never fails. Faith endures forever.